What if being misunderstood doesn't mean you made the wrong decision? Stay tuned as we explore the fear of being misunderstood, why other people may never fully understand the choices you make, and the gentle courage it takes to stop explaining your life and trusting yourself to live it. Welcome back to the Resilient MD, the podcast and YouTube channel where we have honest conversations about medicine, burnout, resilience, and how to care for others without losing ourselves in the process. I'm your host, Dr. Anna McDowell, certified life coach, allergist, and firm believer that small changes can create massive ripple effects. Before we start, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this week marks the first anniversary of this show. The initial episode was launched on August 26, 2025. And since then, I have posted 78 episodes with this one. I'm very proud to have kept up with it and was only late once, but never missed a week. I'm very humbled by the fact that we have over 100 followers on YouTube. And I'm also very humbled that we have had over 1,000 streams or downloads for the podcast by over 600 people from all over the world. I know some may not think of these numbers as a lot, but considering we address a small niche, I'm very happy and honored that I can be helping because that was my goal. When I launched this show, I wanted to help people, especially women. And yes, my focus has been on women physicians, but I truly think everyone can benefit from my message. So, I would like to ask you a favor. Consider it a birthday present, if you will. If you have listened to any of these episodes and felt they have helped you in any ways, it will be a great help if you write a comment, some kind words on iTunes or Spotify. The algorithm uses that to help more people find the show. That will be an amazing way to celebrate this milestone together, and I will truly appreciate it. Anyways, let's go back to the show, right? I am so glad you're here today because I want to talk about something that surprised me during this past year. I thought one of the hardest part of making a significant life change would be making the decision itself. But looking back, that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was realizing that not everyone would understand it. And perhaps even more importantly, learning that they didn't have to. One of the questions people ask me most often is why I left clinical medicine. This is a reasonable question. Medicine was a huge part of my life. I invested years on education, training. I sacrificed a lot. I spent countless hours caring for patients. I loved my patients, and I still feel incredibly grateful for the privilege of practicing medicine. So, when people hear that I intentionally stepped away from seeing patients, they feel puzzled and naturally want an explanation. Over the past 7 months, I've answered the question so many times. What has fascinated me is that the answer hasn't changed, but the interpretation has. Some people hear my story and tell me I was brave. Others hear the very same story and say they could never do what I did. Some assume I must have been completely burned out. Others think I simply wanted an easier life. A few quietly wonder if I will eventually go back. The interesting part is that none of those responses are really about me. They are about the person listening. It is so interesting how each of us hears someone else's story through the lens of our own experiences, values, fears, and hopes. The same decision can sound courageous to one person and confusing to another. It can sound inspiring to someone who longs for change and irresponsible to someone who would never make that same choice. That realization was incredibly freeing because it helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for managing everyone else's interpretation of my life. As a physician, we are trained to explain ourselves. We explain diagnoses, we explain treatment plans, we explain risks and benefits. We explain why we're recommending one medication instead of another. Communication is one of the most important parts of our profession. Somewhere along the way, many of us begin believing that if we simply explain ourselves well enough, everyone will understand. And I have to admit, many times I felt the urge to explain myself better when I thought that my experience was being misunderstood. Then I realized that life doesn't work that way. You can't communicate with kindness, honesty, and clarity, and someone may still disagree with your decision. Not because you explained it poorly, not because they didn't understand, but because they are looking at it from a different perspective. That distinction has become incredibly important to me. In coaching, I often meet women who spend an enormous amount of energy trying to write the perfect explanation before they make a change. They are rehearsing conversations in their minds, trying to anticipate every single question, preparing arguments they hope will convince other people. Sometimes they delay making a decision altogether because they haven't figured out how to explain in a way that everyone will accept. I understand that instinct because it feels safer if everyone agrees. It feels safer if people immediately understand your reasons. But over time, I've realized that explanations don't guarantee understanding. Sometimes they simply provide more information for someone to interpret through their own worldview. One of the things I've reflected in this year is how often I've probably done the same thing. I've heard someone announce they were changing careers or moving across the country, ending a relationship, or making a decision I wouldn't have made. Without realizing it, my mind immediately began creating a story. Maybe they're unhappy. Maybe they're running away from something. Maybe this is a mistake. Our brains naturally try to fill in the missing pieces. We all do it. It is part of being human. The problem begins when we mistake our interpretation for the truth, because the truth is that we almost never know everything another person has lived through before arriving at a decision. We see the outcome, we rarely see the years that led to it. Interestingly, this reminded me of something I experienced many times in medicine. Patients would come into the office convinced they knew what was causing their symptoms because they have read something online or because a friend had shared a similar experience. Sometimes they were right. Most of the time they were not. As physicians, we know there is an entire history we need to gather before reaching a conclusion. We understand how dangerous it can be to make assumptions based on incomplete information. I've realized that the same principle applies outside medicine. We rarely have the complete history of another person's life. So, why do we feel so confident interpreting their choices? An even better question is this: why do we allow other people's incomplete understanding to become evidence that we've made the wrong decision? Before we move on, I want to pause for a moment. I'm curious, have you been feeling exhausted, discouraged, or frustrated and not quite sure why? Are you quietly wondering if this is just how life in medicine has to be? Well, I see you. You don't have to give up on yourself or your dreams. And the good news is that you don't have to figure it all out alone. I built a 6-week one-on-one coaching program designed to help women physicians gently remove the barriers keeping them stuck and rediscover clarity, balance, and purpose. It is called the Resilient MD, just like the podcast and YouTube channel. If you're ready, you can begin today. Schedule your free clarity call. The link is in the show's notes. One of the most important lessons I've learned this year is that integrity and agreement are not the same thing. For a long time, I unconsciously believed that if I made the right decision, people will understand. Now I see things differently. Integrity means making decisions that are consistent with your values, even when they are not universally understood. Agreement is something entirely different. It's wonderful when people support us. It's comforting when they understand, but it isn't always possible. Some decisions can only be fully understood by the person who had to make them. I often think back to the butterfly sanctuary we visited in Belize. When you walk through a butterfly sanctuary, what captures your attention are the butterflies. They are beautiful. Their wings seem effortless. But what we admire is only the final chapter of the story. We don't see the months of preparations. We don't see the caterpillar gathering what it needs before the transformation begins. We don't see the remarkable changes happening inside the chrysalis, where everything familiar is being reorganized. From the outside, someone only sees a butterfly. From the inside, there was an entire process that made those wings possible. Human transformation is much the same. People often see the decision. They don't see the years of reflection. They see the new career. They don't see the quiet doubts that came before it. They see the boundary. They don't see the hundreds of times you ignored your own needs before deciding something had to change. They see the outcome, they rarely see the becoming. If there's one thing I hope you will take away from today's conversation is this. You are the only person who has lived your entire life. You're the only person who knows what you've carried, what you've wrestled with, what you've sacrificed, and what you've learned along the way. That doesn't make you infallible. It doesn't mean you will never make mistakes, but it does mean that some decisions belong primarily to you and you alone. Not because other people's opinions don't matter, but because they are responding to a story they only know in part. You are living the whole story. As I continue this butterfly year with you, I'm becoming more comfortable with something that once felt very uncomfortable to me. Not everyone has to understand my life for it to be meaningful. Not everyone has to agree with my decisions for them to be wise. And I hope the same is true for you. Sometimes living honestly means accepting that other people will write their own versions of your story. My coach Brooke Hicks always says, "Let them be wrong about me." You don't have to spend your life editing the manuscript. You simply have to keep living it with integrity. Remember, my wings grow when I listen. If something in this conversation spoke to you, pass this episode along to a friend who might be walking through a similar season. Next week, we will continue with the same theme and discuss why we have need to over-explain ourselves. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you've been feeling emotionally exhausted from constantly being the dependable one, I think this guide will really speak to you. It is my free people-pleasing reflection guide. It helps high achievers learn how to continue to care deeply without disappearing from their own lives. You can get it at the link in the description below. And if this episode was helpful for you, could you do me a quick favor? Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your favorite platform and like this video on YouTube. It only takes a second and helps this podcast so much. and remember my present. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Until next week, remember that your responsibility isn't to make your life understandable to everyone else. Your responsibility is to live it honestly, one thoughtful decision at a time. I'm Dr. Ona McDowell, a resilient MD just like you. I'll see you next week.